You want to go ahead and finish up making a plate and find a seat. On behalf of the Division of Trauma and Acute Care Surgery, I'm grateful to see all of you here today in support of UAB Trauma Survivors, their families and friends, and the medical professionals who care for them. I'm Allie Holcher, and I'm the Division's Communication Specialist and Trauma Survivor Network Coordinator. Today is National Trauma Survivors Day. A traumatic injury can alter someone's life in an instant and can happen to anyone without warning. Some of the trauma survivors we have here today have lived through car, motorcycle, and ATV accidents, falls, stabbings, gunshot wounds, and burns. Recovery after a traumatic injury can be grueling and doesn't always have a specific endpoint. Physical and emotional pain can linger. Day-to-day life and goals for the future look different after a traumatic injury. Today, we recognize and honor our UAB trauma survivors and their support systems. We acknowledge their unique challenges in the aftermath of their injuries, and we celebrate the resilience they face those challenges with. In a little bit, we're going to hear from four past UAB trauma patients and trauma survivors about their roads to recovery. Before we go any further, let's have a moment of silence to honor those who did not survive their traumatic injuries. I'm honored now to introduce Lynn Klass, the Interim VP of Operations here at UAB that provides oversight for our perioperative services, Heart and Vascular Center, Trauma Burn Program, and inpatient wound care. Lynn?
Thank you, Allie. Good afternoon. I'm so excited to be here and be a part of this celebration today. UAB has been a consistent leader in trauma care, and we continue to support the initiatives and commitment to provide the highest level of care to our trauma patients from across the state and the Southeast region. The UAB Trauma Program has recently been re-verified as an American College of Surgeons Level 1 Trauma Center, and we've had the prestigious honor of holding that verification for the past 24 years. It is so humbling to be a part of an organization that, with rising patient volumes, and our trauma team continues to provide the highest quality care to our patients. I appreciate the collaborative efforts of our trauma physicians and the advances that they have been a part of pioneering in the field of trauma care and responsiveness. We are so grateful for our care teams that take care of our trauma patients. From the trauma bay to the OR to the ICU to the rehabilitation, all levels of staff are involved in ensuring our patients receive the best care possible. Multidisciplinary care is of utmost importance as we care for complex trauma cases, and you'll see that in the stories of the survivors that we'll hear from during the presentations today. Each of the healthcare professionals we have here today exemplify how we live out our UAB medicine core values of own it, do right, always care, and work together. Thank you all for the wonderful work that you do, and a special thanks to our patients for allowing us the opportunity to celebrate and honor you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. I'm now pleased to introduce Dr. Cox, Dr. Daniel Cox, UAB's Trauma Medical Director and Chief of UAB's Trauma Service. Dr. Cox is a colonel in the United States Air Force Reserves and has played an important role in establishing the strong military-civilian partnerships here at UAB. He recently led UAB through a redesign of our trauma service, improving patient outcomes, resulting in reduced length of stay and the increase in the amount of trauma patients that we're able to care for here at UAB, ensuring that the whole state of Alabama and neighboring states can rely on us for trauma care whenever they need it. He also led us through the strenuous American College of Surgeons verification process, solidifying our status as the only ACS verified level 1 trauma center in the state. Please welcome Dr. Cox.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for being here. This is a really great event. It's the second year that we're doing this. And I want to start with thanking Allie. Allie's put this together the last 2 years, and she's done an amazing job of getting us tied into the Trauma Survivors Network, which is pulling in these amazing trauma survivors that also give back with helping our current inpatients and people that are going through their recovery process. So Allie, great job putting this all together, and thank you for all the progress we've made with the Trauma Survivors Network. I want to thank Lynn and the administration. What you guys are going to hear is it is an amazing amount of resources that go into taking care of trauma patients. And the support that we've had from UAB leadership and the administrative support to embrace this mission of trauma care is really why we have the quality outcomes that we have, and we have the team that we've been able to put together here. We believe very passionately in the mission of caring for traumatically injured patients. We take that responsibility of being the only ACS Level 1 trauma center in the state very seriously. And every day we're focused on, not the successes that we've had and some of the things you're going to hear about, but, none of that matters to the next patient that's coming into the trauma bay, right? So that we're always ready for that next patient to get them home to their family, and that you can hear their success story hopefully next year or the following years. Thank you to, it is an enormous team that goes into taking care of trauma patients. So we've got a lot of our care team here, from our nursing staff at, in the trauma bay. We have pre-hospital folks here. Some of our patients would never make it here if it weren't for the great work that happens pre-hospital to stabilize and get them to our doors so that then we can do our work. Our nursing staff in the trauma bay, our OR staff that's here, our ICU, our nursing staff in the ICU and the floors, our APPs that are really the foundational quality metric that ensures the care for our patients on the floors and in the ICU. We couldn't do it without this huge team, so I want to thank them. And then lastly, our survivors that are here to tell their stories. This is, all the people that are here doing all this work, you guys are the reason we're doing it. And hearing these stories, we see so much of the kind of, hardship on the front end and the daily grind of, traumatic things, horrible things happening to good people. To see these outcomes and hear your stories of how you guys are living your lives now, that's inspirational for our whole team to keep coming into work every day, trying to be better tomorrow than we are today, and keep ensuring that we're here to take care of the citizens of the state of Alabama. So. Thank you again for coming out, and thank you primarily to our trauma survivors for coming, taking the time to speak and tell your stories, and thank you for your engagement in the Trauma Survivors Network and helping our current patients that are going through their injuries see the hope that comes on the other side of it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Cox. This time last year, we were launching the Trauma Survivors Network here at UAB. The TSN is an initiative of the American Trauma Society, and its tagline is Survive, Rebuild, Connect. Since last year, we have launched our peer mentoring program with 4 peer mentors now trained in seeing patients. Peer mentoring involves a trained trauma survivor visiting with a current trauma patient at the bedside to answer questions and provide understanding and hope in a way that only someone who has been there can. I'd like to acknowledge our Trauma Survivor Network peer mentors who are here today and who have visited with dozens of our trauma patients at the bedside so far. Please join me in recognizing Diane, Daryl, Jerry, and John. I'd also like to talk about the newly launched program here at UAB, the Violence Intervention and Prevention Partners, or VIP Squared. This program is funded through the Jefferson County Department of Health and City of Birmingham, and services are provided through the Offender Alumni Association. VIP Squared has violence intervention specialists here at UAB with lived experience who mentor survivors of gun violence, connecting them with social, medical, and mental health services, enhancing their employability and monitoring their progress over time, long after they leave the hospital. Our first speaker here today is one of these new violence intervention specialists. Tim Lanier is a veteran, father, podcast host, record label owner, and Woodlawn High School graduate. In his 20s, he became a trauma survivor after being stabbed near the heart and being in intensive care for nearly a month at Caraway Hospital. For decades, he has been passionate about turning his lived experiences into wisdom and hope for others, even while incarcerated. Tim, we're happy to have you here today.
Good afternoon, how y'all doing? All right, my name is Tim Lanier. I'm work with OAA. I'm a trauma survivor, and I want to say one thing that I didn't get to say 30 years ago to the hospital employees when I went through what I went through. And I want to tell y'all, because the same spirit that was in that hospital that saved my life that's in here. I want to say thank you. I want to say thank you for being dedicated, for being the people that you are, that care enough to help the people that didn't know they needed help. And when we were in those comas and those high risk positions we were in, y'all were there. Late at night when we were sitting there and crying to ourselves, scared to really know whether you're gonna live or die. A lot of the nurses came in and just comforted us. A lot of the doctors kept it straight up with me and told me what was happening and told me what I can do. And once they got to the point where they said, well, hey, we done did everything we can do, is up to you now. That's when people like me, the VIS, have to kick in. Because not knowing what comes after trauma is probably the worst thing that happened to me. Because after the trauma, I still had to go through the psychological effects, the mental effects, and the spiritual effects of being injured, and learning how to relive the life that was destroyed before I got there. So I had to understand who I was again, and there was nobody there. The first VIS I ever met, violence intervention specialist, was my grandmother. When I went home, she was the one who nursed me back to health. She was the one that spoke encouraging words to me. She was the one who told me, I don't care what you look like right now, you're still you. It doesn't matter what you've been through, you're still you, and I love you regardless. You can do whatever you want to do, just don't give up. Plenty of times I wanted to stop, because after I got out of the hospital, I ended up going to prison. I went to the hospital 1 month, 6 months later I was in prison. Wounds barely healed, never went to a rehab or anything like that. My first rehab was in prison, nobody was there. It was a different time back then. Today, UAB has decided that once you get out of the hospital, you still need help. And we started a program at OAA to help the people that coming out of these trauma situations, especially gunshot wounds, to get their life back together, to work on themselves, to know that they still have a life after the death that they had. And the death is the death of that person that they was, and now they have to learn how to relive, recalibrate themselves. And it's not an easy road. It's not anything that you wake up and say, I want to do this. You wake up and say, I have to do this. You wake up and say that if I don't, where will my life be? So we had to keep going strong every day. In prison, I did 18 years. And after them 18 years, during them 18 years, I met a lot of guys that had trauma coming from the street. And immediately I started feeling their pain, understanding what they were going through, and having conversations with them. This was my first experience of doing trauma support. When they didn't have anybody to talk to, they'd come talk to me. It got to the point at certain times in the prison, I used to have to put a do not disturb on my bunk because everybody wanted to talk about what was going on. And I didn't want to turn nobody down, but I needed rest also. because you still have to fill yourself up with the goodness of God to me in order to give it back. So I constantly fill myself up, I constantly move forward, and I constantly want to help. That's what we're here for now. That's what the VIP Square is here for. That's what OAA is here for. That's what I'm here for. And we're going to move it forward. We're doing great. We're helping people. We're giving hope to people who felt they were hopeless. We give encouragement to those ones that need encouragement. And we give experience to the journey. When they look at us, they look at what can happen if you keep going. Where you are now, that's where we're going to meet you at. But I am where you can go. You can go through all these different things I went through and still make it and still become something other than what people told you were going to do. When they told you couldn't do this and couldn't do that, you still do it. So I'm just thankful for being able to be here, being able to tell the doctors, the nurses, the support system, thank you for everything that y'all did for me and everything that y'all do for the people that come through this system. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Next up, we have Wil Raines. His accident occurred the day after Christmas, 1997, when he was just 17 years old. Wil was in the passenger side of his friend's Bronco when they were hit head-on. Wil wasn't wearing a seatbelt and was ejected from the vehicle. He suffered a Class 5 liver laceration and had to have 2 surgeries to repair his liver. One involved cracking open his chest to reconnect the veins from his liver to his heart. Dr. Sherry Melton, who many of you know, was one of his trauma surgeons at the time. He's joined today by his family and his personal physician who saw him soon after his accident and facilitated his travel to UAB. Wil is now a photojournalist with CBS 42, and he's going to share a little bit about his road to recovery.
I stand before you today to share with you my personal experience and the power of God in prayer. On December 26, 1997, I was involved in a serious car wreck that could have and should have taken my life. It's been 9,273 days since my accident, and not a day goes by that I don't think about it, and it has forever changed me. The journey of a trauma survivor is not an easy one. It involves healing physical and emotional wounds, but with the help of loved ones, support groups, and therapy, and people like this, it makes it possible. To the ER staff, trauma staff, nurses at UAB, and especially to my family doctor, Dr. Charles Cotier, I'm forever indebted. Your professionalism, skillful approach to the medical care that you provided me went beyond the call of duty. The tireless dedication to your profession, your patience is nothing short of remarkable. I can never express how grateful I am for the selflessness, kindness, and unwavering commitment to my healing in the time of need that the staff at UAB showed. Your care, your attention allowed me to make a full recovery, and for that I will always be grateful. You're the unsung heroes of the healthcare system and the backbone of the community and the heart and soul of this hospital. Last but not least, I want to thank my parents, Larry and Jackie, who were here with me the whole time and never left me for the whole day. And to Allie for getting this thing together, thank you, and thank you all.
Thank you, Wil. Next up, we have Gregory Case, scanning the crowd for Greg. Greg is an attorney with the Shelby County Public Defender Office. In 2016, he had a motorcycle wreck where the handlebars tore him open down the center of his chest, causing injuries to his bladder, colon, and hips. He was in and out of surgeries for 2 years and 9 months. One of his surgeons was Dr. Reef. I'm not sure, is Dr. Reef here? Okay, he's post call. Greg has been asked over the years to visit with other trauma patients, and he brings positivity in his interactions with other survivors. We're excited to hear a little bit more about his recovery today. Greg?
I had a small amount of trauma this morning. My phone went off and it said, "You have an appointment at UAB." I was like, ah! But then I remembered that I didn't have to come for, like surgery or anything. I had a motorcycle wreck on April 10th of 2016. They took me to Shelby and did a chest tube. The helicopter was broken down, so I didn't get flown in. I got brought by ambulance. My surgeon during the time was Dr. Reef, and he spent a lot of time with me. He had to go out and tell my wife and son, my daughter, that I wasn't going to make it. And I understand tempering expectations and everything. But one day, Dr. Reeve came to my room, and it was the first time I had seen him. I was more or less out of it for about 3 months, and he comes in, and he has, of course, the little gaggle of interns with him, and he said, "Mr. Case, how are we today?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I've been worse." Dr. Reeve's face just goes like this. And he turns around to the interns and he says, "Could you please step out for a moment?" And he closed the door and he came back in and he said, "Mr. Case, I am the guy that was with you from the time they wheeled you in to the time they wheeled you out." He goes, I don't know if you remember me." And he goes, "But," he said, "I had to tell your wife and daughter and son that you were going to die about 4 times. He said, but something in you wouldn't die." And he said, so here we are." And he goes, "So I don't know if what you said a few minutes ago about being, been worse, was your way of dealing with it with humor or, what?" He goes, "But let me assure you, you have been worse, and it was not that long ago." He looks at me and he says, I've reviewed your charts. And in about 3 years, which coincidentally is about what it took, he said, people won't be able to tell you had a wreck. You'll be able to tell it, but they won't. And he goes, "So when you're out there living your normal life, when you're out there going to have a drink with your friends or dinner, going to, any place, if you pass by a church, you might want to stop in and say thank you." And he left, and I never seen him again. But I would just say it was a long road. I had a hip fixator that apparently that I was trying to remove the entire time that I was, coming out of it. I've told my anesthesiologist that I did not miss fentanyl. I have vivid memories of things that didn't happen, things that I'm angry about, but I can't be angry because they didn't happen. And I really realized that about 10 months later when I was in rehab. I was like, well, when I was going to Atlanta and when I was going to Tuscaloosa and when I was going, and then something in my head went, "You idiot, you never went anywhere. You were in that room on the 9th floor." So, as trauma survivors, we've done the easy part. We survived. Now that's the hard part. We got to live. Do something that you want to do. Do something fun. And I say this to the medical professionals here too. And let me take this time to say thank all of you. Thank all of you. And give yourselves a hand, please. Y'all make a big difference in how one of my nurses, when I went up to see a friend of mine in trauma, as a matter of fact, she walked up to me and she said, "I always knew you would be okay." She said, "I could tell from when you woke up that you were going to be all right." And I was asking her about my friend. I said, "Well, what about John?" She said, "It's up to him." And that's a lot to remember, that it's up to us, whether you get back on your feet. And I want to thank you all again, because I can live with this. This is the best it's good. They told me after about 3 years, this is as good as we can put you back together. I inquired about an extended warranty plan, but they said no. So I would just end with saying, I got all these memes and stuff from people, trying to cheer me up. It was like, some of them were kind of out there, some of them were not applicable, some of them were just stupid. But a couple that stuck with me, one said, God will only give you what you can handle. Apparently, God thinks I'm a badass. And the other one, and this is a lesson for all of us, was just a quote from Buddha. It says, the trouble is, you think you have time. You don't know how much time you have. And when you get a second chance, you're thankful. And thank y'all for the second chance.
Thank you, Greg. Last but not least, we have Christy Bullock today. Of all of our speakers today, Christy was the most recent patient here at UAB, and we're thankful for her being willing to share her story with us so soon after her injury. Her injury happened in the fall of 2021 when she was on a motorcycle ride near Mount Cheeha. She hit a guardrail taking a curve, and while her body was stopped, her head kept moving forward, and she suffered an internal decapitation. Which, if you don't know, if you were here at our event last year, one of our speakers last year also is an internal decapitation survivor. This means that all the ligaments connecting her skull to her spine were severed. This is obviously often a fatal injury. She's going to talk more about her recovery, but it was truly a multidisciplinary effort from the first responders to the neurocritical trauma and neurosurgical teams and to the nurses who lifted her spirits in a very special way. Christy now shares her journey on a YouTube channel, reaching an audience of trauma survivors around the world. Christy, we're happy you're here today.
Okay. I'm just going to start by saying I am very nervous. I've had a very difficult 2 days with anxiety about doing this, but then the thought occurred to me last night that there are at least 5 of you in this room that have had your finger in my butt, and suddenly I feel better. The other trauma survivors know what I'm talking about. So before my accident, I worked as a paramedic, so does my husband, and that day I was riding a motorcycle with my dad. I was what I thought a responsible rider. I was not a new rider, but it still did not work out in my favor that day. I guess we all just think it won't happen to us. But I remember right before I hit the guardrail, I knew that I was gonna wreck, and I thought, this is gonna hurt. The thought of death never crossed my mind. My first memory was waking up on the ground, looking up at the sky, and I could hear my dad on the phone with 911. And I guess I went into work mode because I started telling my dad to call a helicopter, because that's what I did for my patients. I got here to UAB where it was discovered that I had the internal decapitation, which, by the way, whoever got my helmet off, I want to speak to you. I'm amazed that y'all were able to get my helmet off without killing me after I found out just how bad it was. But not only did I have the internal decapitation, I injured both carotid arteries, my vertebral arteries, my lungs were damaged, multiple ribs, I broke my back in 3 places, I had a bad tibial plateau fracture, I have the sexiest leg in Alabama now. But those early days in ICU, and this is a little bit more difficult, I think, for me because it's still fresh. And I've done a lot of talking about what happened to me, but I haven't really talked through it. And I didn't realize that until we were prepping for this event. And I think so y'all are kind of y'all are the guinea pig for me processing this in front of you, and I'm no public speaker, that's for sure. It's just a average girl with a weird story. But those early days, the things that I struggled with the most was losing control over my own body, not being able to scratch my own itch or tell anybody what I needed. I couldn't really move, complete helplessness, even over your bowel movements. For a young woman, to suddenly have people changing your diapers is a horrific experience that transitioned over to when I cared for my mother-in-law recently as she was passing away, and I would change her diaper and she would say, "Christy, you have no idea how embarrassing this is." And I said, "But I do, and it's okay, I'm here for you," like they were for me. I started to get better. I was extubated for a brief time, and then I had a very rare complication. My husband was in the room, my sister, who's over there. My sister, by the way, just came out of the OR. She is a procurement nurse here at UAB. She takes care of organ donors until they go to harvest. This day, I suddenly quit breathing. I blew both my pupils, lost my gag reflex, and was entered into UAB's referral system for organ donation. My sister was locked out because I was now a patient. I had a delayed onset of hydrocephalus that caused me to go into sudden respiratory arrest and into a coma. The fact that I ever woke up from that is something that we will never understand. But I did wake up, and then I started the long road to recovery. That's how I got this lovely, I call it my other butthole, but Allie wanted me to talk about some of the things that helped me through my recovery, so I jotted a couple things down, and some of the most important things for me was being heard, knowing that my nurses, my family, my doctors were listening to me. And there were a lot of bad days. I tell people when they're going through something to just hang in there, because there's a good day on the horizon, and those good days now are much better than they used to be. So now, about a year, so 6 months ago, I kept getting asked the same questions over and over again, and everybody wanted to hear this crazy story. So I started a YouTube channel, not knowing what in the world I was doing. And apparently I pleased the algorithm, and that first video kind of took off across the world. And so now I've been fledging along, trying to figure out what to do with my YouTube channel. And I really didn't have that clarity until the other day when Allie forced me to do this uncomfortable Zoom with the other speakers. And I realized on that Zoom that I have not talked with other people that have gone through anything like what I've been through. And the support that I got from Greg and Tim and the encouragement really meant a lot to me, and made me realize that I want to use my YouTube, my podcast, whatever I can to get that encouragement to other people. And by far the biggest, I saved this for last because I'm gonna cry, but those ICU days, I had ICU delirium. I was in there for over 2 months, and the mental, I cannot understate the mental turmoil of being an ICU patient in that condition. As a mother, I couldn't see my kids. I was physically suffering. I was mentally suffering. I was scared. And Stacy over there, and Connie over there, Haley, Lori, all these people got together, and Stacy said, "I'll tell you what, if you get off this ventilator, I'm gonna take you up to the helipad and we're gonna watch the sunset." And so she kept that promise. And they spent an hour and a half packaging me up to take me to the helipad, and we watched the sunset over Children's Hospital. We took beautiful pictures. My favorite part of the pictures is I zoom in and I look at Stacy's face, and I look at my hand holding Stacy's hand. And I cry every time because you will never know. You'll never know what you did, and it's so special. Emma did a write-up on it, which got picked up by The Good Doctor on ABC, and they put that story on their season finale the other day. I did not know until my phone started blowing up. So that's what your nurses here do for their patients. I want you to know that as a fellow healthcare provider, I'm no longer a paramedic, but I know what it's like to take work home with you. I know what it's like to wonder, is this really worth it? And when you have those thoughts, just know that it is worth it. It might not be to everybody, but there's going to be that one person that you're everything for. So thank you.
Let's hear it one more time for all of the trauma survivors who bravely shared their stories today. I just want to give some shout outs so everybody gets a chance to be acknowledged. Let's hear it for, I don't know if we have any here today, but the EMS professionals and first responders who are instrumental in saving lives even while putting themselves in harm's way. Let's hear it for our surgeons, nurses, APPs, OR staff, anesthesiologists, respiratory therapists, registrars, case managers, hope and rebirth, and that despite challenges and setbacks, there can be growth and beauty after trauma. The survivors here today have found purpose in their lives after trauma, and they let the light shine through them in their service of others and by sharing their stories. I want to thank everyone again for coming today. I want to give a quick shout out to all of our vendors, and I want to make sure everybody gets a chance to see every table. So we have Hand and Paw Therapy Dogs. The Offender Alumni Association has a table where you can learn more about the Violence Intervention Program. We have Stop the Bleed training, so you can learn how to use a tourniquet, apply pressure to save someone's life. Arts and Medicine is here. We have a collaborative art project going on where you can actually paint a red tulip or write a note to a trauma survivor. We have Big Spoon ice cream, Graze Together cheese spread, and we have a photo booth in the back. And I'd like to invite Will, Greg, Tim, and Christy up for a group photo. Thank you, everyone.